What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the site. Today we're going to be covering a video on preventing spinal injuries. So taking a little look at what we can do to prevent the rate at which or either the degree at which we can expect to see spinal injuries occur. Now, we're going to provide in context to primarily sort of the strength training world. So not only limited to individuals who compete or, train for strength, but individuals who are probably going to see their spinal injuries come about as a result of maybe what they're doing in the gym or any sort of manual labor job where they're putting a lot of force through the body, as opposed to things like sitting habits. So in fact, you're leaning over a desk all day. This is a back injury, but some of the stuff that we're looking at here may not be all too relevant. And if that's you and you would like some help still with that, my Instagram is on the screen here. Drop me a message and I'm sure I can help you out. Now, the majority of the stuff that I'm going to cover in this video is stuff that I have either learned from or applied his methods to and learned in context dealing with an athlete from Dr. Stuart McGill. He is the GOAT of all things spine. If you're interested in more about Dr. Stuart McGill, we actually had him feature on the injury rehabilitation video. Thumbnail is on the screen here from the website. If you head to our website, www.bullstrong.co.uk, you can find that injury rehabilitation video and you can see what Dr. McGill has to say for himself when it comes to this area. But he is essentially the GOAT of all things spine. And you will find why in that video or if you Google him. But in this video, we're going to be looking more, as I say, at preventing spinal injuries. So what can we do to prevent them? Now, we're going to split this video up into sort of three topics, and we do actually have a guest again, which is super interesting and correlates really nicely to what we're doing today. So, firstly, we're going to look at post-surgery rehabilitation programming. So imagining that we've had surgery, looking at the programming that we would be prescribed to do following that surgery and doing that without actually having the surgery. The second thing we're going to be looking at is training discipline. So making sure that we're actually disciplined within the execution of our sets within the gym. And then we're going to jump on a call with Brian. We are going to discuss the spine training for longevity and actually looking at as well how we want to be training the core for an optimal spine mechanic. So let's get straight into it. Often it is actually the post-surgery rehabilitation programming that actually will yield the most benefit or the greatest contribution in terms of that rehab for the niggle that you have at the time. So usually this program will look something along the lines of 6 to 8 weeks of minimal or at least significantly limited activity and a significantly reduced training volume if you're still in the gym. And this will obviously allow more time for recovery, and given that you've got a smart practitioner, you will probably be doing stuff that really won't contribute or interfere with the healing process of the area that is injured at all. And so it will allow for optimal recovery while still allowing you to be ticking certain boxes as you're training or completing your work or whatever it is that you need to do. So this may sound like a rehabilitation plan, as it is. But if we can remove the surgery aspect and just complete the actual program that you would see as part of your recovery, we could argue that this is actually a prevention technique, because instead of anticipating that the injury is going to occur, continuing to man up and train through it, and then seeing the injury and doing the rehab plan, if we can start to incorporate aspects of that rehab plan now, obviously what we're going to be doing there is the 3-stage process of elimination from Dr. Stuart McGill. We're going to eliminate the source of pain, find a pain-free movement to replace the painful exercise with, and we're going to be moving as part of the activity plan. So we are going to basically be prehabbing as opposed to rehabbing, which is of course way more advantageous because it saves us having to go through the process of, oh, I'm injured, I can't do this, and the mental, because we know how mentally you are affected when an injury occurs. I know for me, I could literally cry when I get injured. So if we can completely eliminate that by being smarter with our training and introducing a prehab plan, obviously this is a great technique when it comes to injury prevention. So the second point that Dr. Stuart McGill mentions that I think holds incredible value when it comes to injury prehab or injury prevention is actually to maintain discipline throughout the execution of your training. So let's take the example of a bench and a deadlift, because I think these are really two really good examples to explain the point here. When you're bench pressing, if you lower the bar down to your chest, you're building great elasticity, you're really tight within your back, everything is incredibly structured and rigid, you press, and then all of a sudden, as you get to the point where maybe you're starting to reach full extension of the elbow, you then kind of just flop and hold it and just throw it back relaxed. That's okay, but obviously you are then compromising the structure, you are compromising the rigidity of that lift. And so what was once a very tight, well-held bar in a rigid position that you have full control over, you're now flopped, there's way less structure underneath that bar, and you're asking for trouble. The second example is the deadlift. You will get into a perfect, nice, tight position, you will deadlift the bar, you will lock the bar out, and then you will almost just flop and drop the bar. Now, again, another example here of how we lose control of that bar. If we can control the eccentric, not only are we going to get more benefits in terms of motor unit recruitment and general muscular damage across the board, but we're also in control of that bar. And as we know, that is going to be far, far more likely to hold that injury risk nice and low. Now, whilst these two things aren't huge issues that if you do them every now and again you're going to see a major repercussion in terms of getting injured every time, it's the accumulation of the bad habit that's probably going to mean the injury risk is higher. And as an athlete, why on earth would we accept a high injury risk when we don't have to? The sport is already a high enough of an injury risk in general, so if we can bring injury risk down in certain areas of the sport, why would we not do that? So I think that maintaining discipline throughout training is an absolute essential. On that note, then, we are going to jump onto a call with Brian Carroll now and discuss certain aspects such as the spine, training for longevity, how to train the core properly. If you guys would like some background on Brian Carroll, if you were into the world of powerlifting, he needs no introduction, but I'll give it anyway just for anyone who is curious. I'll have him linked down below so you can check his details out if you're interested. A 537 kilo squat, a 374 kilo bench, and a 362 kilo deadlift, I do believe, which would mean a 1238 total, I think. I'm not sure. I think, regardless of whether I'm bang on or slightly off there, you can see the combination of those numbers. Even if I'm off by 10%, are still absolutely incredible. And so, sort of, if he didn't need any introduction, he certainly doesn't now. He was training through his career and ended up actually getting a really bad back injury. Now, he went off to see Dr. Stuart McGill in Canada out of the University of Waterloo. And the goal was simple: get Brian back to be pain-free and get him back on the platform competing. Now, they did this and actually decided to write a book up as well on the process. Now, this book is called A Gift of Injury. And if I'm honest, I think it's actually one of the best books out there, especially under this heading of injury prevention and rehabilitation. And so I would really recommend that you purchase this book in addition to The Back Mechanic by Dr. Stuart McGill. I think the combination of these two books really sets you up in such an advantageous position as either an athlete or a coach, not only for sort of diagnosis of injuries, but also for the prehab and the rehabilitation of injuries that you may see with yourself or clients of yours. So with that being said, we're going to jump on a call now with Brian and cover those three topics. Taking McGill's methods and pushing them into the powerlifting community is something that we've needed for a long time. You see a lot of people doing, foam rolling their back extremely before they train, doing lots of core flexions, sit-ups, crunches, in the hope that it's going to get them this six-pack, and they don't really understand the mechanics. So that's sort of what I wanted to do today. Now, I want to keep it relatively brief, if that's possible, and we're just going to go through the questions that I've got here. First one is going to be, how important do you think it is to sort of really prioritise spinal positioning for strength training?
It's not debatable. It's totally important. It jeopardizes the integrity of the lift, for one. Looseness is the enemy of power. So if your spine is moving under load, you're losing energy, and flexion under load causes disc bulges. So the person who likes to squat low bar, if that's a good technique for them, depending on how they're built. Now, a low bar squat with someone who has a very long torso is a terrible idea, okay? Because you're going to end up having them lean over so much to try to get depth.
Yeah.
So that everyone's going to be different. Now, a taller athlete that deadlifts conventional, they can keep their back locked into flexion and not going into flexion under load. That's acceptable. But for someone who's moving under load, it's going to end up causing them back problems. It's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
Because all the work that they do is cumulative, even with 135, even with 225. And we're not even talking about 700, 800, 900, 1,000 pounds that people are pulling these days. So everything is cumulative. So it's all the importance. It's not even debatable how important spinal position is, not just for leverages, but for overall health. arching for the bench, it really just depends. Now we got to go back and look at injury mechanisms too. If someone doesn't have a bulged disc, they're not flexion intolerant, they might be able to do the rounded back deadlifts for a long time. Others might be able to do them for 2 months or 2 years or 2 decades. Everyone is so different. A lot of it has to do with who your parents are and your luck. There's so much that goes into it. The bench arch, if someone is extension intolerant, they're not going to be able to have a big arch, and it's going to mess with their deadlift, and it's going to mess with their squat. So everything has to be considered on an individual basis.
So the key factors that you think we need to implement to a training program in order to maintain longevity and be able to lift for a long period of time?
Yeah, so the way you posed the question was lifting for longevity. Now, if you're just trying to lift for longevity, period, because strength wasn't included necessarily as most important. If you're just lifting for longevity, you would do general basic fitness. You wouldn't be pushing the absolute envelope with strength training. You would be doing enough to stabilize joints, do special conditioning exercises to carry over what you're trying to do on the weekends. Now, powerlifting is a lot different. It's about load adaptation and pushing the body to human limits. So the idea there is to kind of toe the line, which is very hard to do. And when you cross that tipping point, things break. And that's the problem. So each person is going to be different, but there has to be load management, intensity management, and volume management, because everyone responds differently. Everyone's threshold is different. How long has someone been lifting? Well, if they have a virgin spine, you don't want to just load them up with a 300-pound squat and then expect their end plates not to break. There has to be load adaptation. So that's why you see so many people that get in the gym for a year or two and blow their back out and then come to see someone like me or Dr. McGill. But load management, taking time off, listening to your body, and having sensible, sustainable programming. Benching 3 days a week and squatting 2 days a week and deadlifting 2 days a week is not a sensible way to sustain strength gains. It's a way to destroy your body very quickly. And I've seen so many of these people that use this programming, someone like Lane Norton that I fixed, that was squatting 3 days a week. What do you expect? If you know anything about physiology, that's not going to last. It's going to destroy your body. No matter what drugs you're taking, what supplements you're taking, you're sleeping 15 hours a day, it does not matter. There are limits, and you have to adapt to push forward. Yeah. It takes time to do that.
Absolutely. You totaled 12:38, right?
Whatever 27:30 is. Probably more than that.
Adding up your best lifts that I know of, it came to 12:38. Anyway, with your biggest total or best lift, whatever, what was sort of your layout of the week? How would you structure your week? Would you squat 4 times, 1 time? Just what was your layout?
So day one would be squat and deadlift, which allowed my back to recover a period of time. So just think, let's say a traditional setup is squat on Monday, bench on Wednesday, deadlift on Friday.
Yeah.
What I did, instead of having to recover Monday to Friday, and then the bench in between with the hyperextension, I put deadlift and squat on day one, so I had a full week to recover before I was demanding load of my spine again. Does that make sense?
So
that way I was able to squat and deadlift. I would stagger my loads, stagger my intensity, stagger my volume. Then once I got through bench on Wednesday, then I had more days to recover instead of having to turn around after the extension on Wednesday and deadlift again on Friday.
So
I see some programs. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so would your, from Wednesday through to Monday, would that be off completely, or would you incorporate some sort of secondary squat or deadlift days or accessories?
Yeah, exactly. So Friday would be a squat and deadlift complementary day.
Okay, yeah.
So I would do, like, for instance, belt squats were popular back then, but variations of belt squats, lighter load, maybe a safety bar squat, just to pump blood in my weak points. Let's say someone misses halfway through on the squat like I do, it's quads that are given away. My core is still locked in. I just run out of quads to stand up with the weight sometimes. So on that day, my focus would be quads, not so much hamstring and hips, if that makes sense. And then upper back. You need a big upper back for a nice shelf to keep that bar nice and stable, especially if you like a very low bar that people tend to like, especially long-legged people. The opposite of me. I've got a very long torso, so I like to stick the bar up higher and squat straight up and down. Someone with very long legs, they're not going to be able to do that type of style of squat.
Yeah. Would you deload? If so, how often? What would your deload look like?
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. So what I found is about every 3 to 4 weeks after pushing the body, I'd always regress. Louis Simmons used to talk about this a lot when he wrote in Powerlifting USA in the 90s and early 2000s. He would talk about 3 weeks in a row at 90% or more, you'll start to regress.
Yeah.
What he does is he switches up the main exercise. Well, I disagree on switching up the main exercise. Stimuli is stimuli. You're still beating your body down. You're still, whether it's a heavy rack pull or good morning, you're still demanding a lot of your brain talking to your muscles and sending dead signals out. You can't do that indefinitely. So with that said, every 3 to 4 weeks, sometimes 5 weeks if I'm not going really heavy, I'll take a week where I just sharpen up technique. I take the intensity, the volume down to about 50%. And sometimes I'll go heavier, 60, 65, RPE 5 or 6. I like RPE because it's a scalable way of adjusting to your surroundings and how you're feeling at that time. So I'll use like a 5 or 6 RPE on deload days and work on honing in that perfect form. Hell, some weeks I won't even get under the bar. I'll just use kettlebells or dumbbells. Mm-hmm. And that provides a lot of recovery for me, along with my walks and my direct core work, which we're going to talk about. But the experience has definitely left me a lot more in tune with my body. I like to stay ahead of the fatigue curve.
Yeah.
You can always take a week off. You can always go heavier eventually, but you can't take that week back that you went heavier on.
Exactly that. And often as well, being smart instead of being a pussy leads to longevity, and longevity yields much greater results than a short burst of sort of extra intense training. For me, I'm currently in an off season. I'm doing rapid pause squats and whatnot, and so for me the load's a little bit lighter, and so I'm able to sort of go 5 or 6 weeks, as you say. But when I peaked, I actually put 40 kilo on my squat in a 6-week period. Well, 7 week including the deload. And that was for a peak for a meet, and I only took the 1 week off, but it was still 3 week either side. Whereas now in an off season, less load, I can handle more. And that's just about being smart and sort of listening to your body, identifying, okay, now I need to take a break in order to be able to train better the following 3 weeks. So
you've got a lot of wisdom for only being 20.
Thank you. The final thing I wanted to jump into, and I know that there's a lot to talk about, but again, if we can, as briefly as possible, how do you train the core? Now, I know that's a massively wide question, but identify for me what you do, why you do it, and why you avoid core flexion.
Got it. People accuse me of a lot of things, and one of them is not being brief. Okay, so
yeah, I can see.
Of course, the McGill Big Three is the 3-pronged stabilization of McGill method.
Yeah.
It's not the McGill method; it's just part of it. So you got the bird dog, the variations of the side plank, and then of course the curl up, which is a modified curl up to save your back and still get some abdominal contraction. So, of course, we get that out of the way. I use that every single day. Part of my warm-up, part of my cool-down, that's not negotiable, especially with people with back pain. But there's much more than that. It depends on the demands of your sport. So mine, powerlifting, I need a rigid trunk, a rigid core. So a lot of suitcase carries. Bottoms-up carries is a progression. Farmer's carries if I want to go really heavy. Those sort of exercises stir the pot. Variations of the bug and the dead bug. Doing a front plank while doing a row, or a front plank on one arm. There's so many different things that I like to do, but I like to keep it very simple, and that usually contains stirring the pot, some type of loaded carry, asymmetrical most times, to challenge my glute on one side, challenge my QL and erector on the other. Yeah. Anything that brings in grip and core, I love.
Yeah, for me, I have always looked to make sure that I train the core like everything else. So that means progression. Now, again, it's about being smart, and you don't just chuck 4 20-kilo plates in a backpack and do a plank. Make sure week in, week out that you're going to get better, but do it smartly. Something that I've incorporated is just, for example, I'll grab like a 16 kilo, that's like what, 35 pounds, 40 pounds, something like that. And I'll do just a single leg RDL, and then I'll do a single row, and I'll do a single whatever to sort of wake up stabilizers pre-training. I think for me that helps with, one, eliminating injury risk or impingement risk, but also activating the core and using it for its proper purpose of being a stabilizer.
What was that last part? I'm sorry.
Just using the core for its proper purpose as a stabilizer.
Yes. And just standing on one leg is a good core activator. Holding weight in one arm while standing on the opposite leg and locking in the torso. That's a great tool. Doing the one leg deadlifts like you talked about. Great core exercise, great hamstring, great way to make sure you have balance. And at the end of the day, the core work and powerlifting is about stiffness. The back, the core is not made for movement. The ball and sockets, the shoulders and hips are. And this is specific to powerlifting. You don't need hypermobility in your spine. You're being a gymnast, you do. Yeah. You need that mobility. But you're talking about a gymnast being a willow branch and a powerlifter being an oak tree. Can't have both.
Exactly. And as well, that's the problem that I can't get my head around, the huge arch. Because, yes, your range of motion's smaller, but that doesn't always mean you can load more. And the sole goal of powerlifting is to have the most weight on the bar. And it doesn't always mean that, because the elbow angle and all this, and that's just another topic to discuss. So some really interesting topics covered there with Brian. We actually went on to talk for a long while after the conversation that you've just seen, and there are plenty more topics that we covered within that call that we could quite easily formulate into one of these website content videos. So if there are any topics that you are interested in seeing, my Instagram is here, or if you're watching this on YouTube, then make sure you drop a comment below letting me know what you want to see on the channel. But that conversation was sort of well over a year ago now, so we've certainly come a long way since then. But there was some real value in that call, and some of the points that we made, I still think to this day are bang on in terms of their accuracy. So I hope you've enjoyed the content. I hope you've enjoyed the chat with Brian. We'll definitely get him back on the content videos if there is other topics that you like that we've already filmed, or if not, we can jump on another call and get that discussed. So let me know what you want to see. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.